Well, my name is Ron Grover. I'm the LA Bureau Chief for Business Week magazine. I apologize for being a little bit late. I was downstairs at the Bob Iger thing, and took me a while to get through all the traffic to get up here. Okay, so the panel today is social media and the user-generated media economy, which takes in just about everything. Take content, personalization, lifestyle, advertising, wherever these guys go, I imagine we will go today. All right, so that covers a lot of territory, and there's, user-generated content, social networks, and there's a lot of crossovers between a lot of other things that we're seeing that are kind of impinging on and changing those territories. Quarter Life, the TV show, started out as an online TV show with its own social network, and then went on to be one of the big bombs on NBC Network not long after that, and has now been shuttled off to Bravo, where it will most likely die an untimely death somewhere down the road. All right, so Katie Couric has her own YouTube channel. MySpace is making a TV show right now in Great Britain for MTV. It's making tons of other television shit. Other sites, which are so-called user-generated sites, have gone into professional content, so we're starting to go into that area. And I'm sure there are other things I don't even know about that are here. So let's get started. We have down at the end Mark Goldman. I hope I'm going to have these in the correct order. Mark Goldman is Chief Operating Officer of Current TV. Those of you who may not know Current TV, Current TV is a channel, a cable television channel that was started by Al Gore and by Joel Hyatt of the Hyatt Legal Services chain, that features user-generated shows, user-generated advertising. It's seen in about 41 million U.S. homes, I think over 50 million worldwide homes. Mark came to Current TV from Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation, which means he has growth in his DNA someplace. And while he was there, he helped launch the Sky Latin channel, cable channels that are now part of DirecTV, I believe. All right. We have next to a couple down, Ty Ahmad Taylor, pronounced correctly? Ahmad Taylor. He is a veteran of the interactive wars, having started with At Home, which was a cable portal channel, what was it, Ty? Broadband. In the 90s that came and went, I think, but was kind of an early before its time. He's currently Vice President of Program Development at the MTV Networks, which has about a zillion social network sites last time I checked. I may be overstating, but they just launched one for, I think, social conscious youths. They have one for Logo, for lesbians and homosexuals, I think. Am I right? And they have a zillion others, which he'll tell you about. Further on down is Josh Bernhoff. Josh is every reporter's best friend. He laughs derisively. He's a helpful source of information on all things about digital content and television and God knows what else. I have his cell phone number that tells you what a great source he is for those of us in the reporting profession. He is a vice president, principal analyst at Forrester Research. He's author of a new book called Groundswell, which is about, surprise, social networks, blogs, and how companies can succeed by using them. We have Adrian Sexton, who is somewhere in the middle, right there. He is our Hollywood connection. Let's see if I mispronounce this. He is president of Participant Productions. EVP of Participant. I just gave you a big promotion just for the hell of it. Now, Participant Productions is eBay founder Jeff Skoll's company, I believe, which has produced a bunch of, am I right? Which has produced a bunch of movies, is producing new television programs for digital distribution. In his private life, he oversaw digital marketing campaigns for films like like Lionsgate's Oscar-winning film Crash, Monsters Ball, which I think won an Academy Award for Halle Berry, and among several others. And Stephen Smith is a man after my own heart. He comes from us from the print media, which is, we were kind of a small and shrinking fraternity, I believe. Although he is trying to move hard to move Reuters online. Right?
We're actually
He's now a defector. He's gone.
100% digital.
All right, he's moving Reuters Online into wireless then? Is that right?
Online, mobile, interactive TV, digital signage, syndication.
Well, somebody gave me the wrong information. Now you do run, is it Reuters Labs?
I look after Reuters Media in North and South America. So
All right. All I know is on this Reuters Lab, they had something called Second Life, which means that you can go off and you can become some reporter, like my stupid self, and have your own bureau chief, Adam Reuter, I think.
Correct.
And have the life of a reporter if you're so foolish to want to have a life of a reporter. Mark Shedroff is right in the middle there. He comes from us from the place that started it all, user content that is, YouTube, where he executes partner deals with major media companies. And I'm assuming that he was in on the deal to bring Hulu to YouTube. Yes?
We don't have a deal with Hulu.
He will tell you the deals that he was in on to bring to YouTube.
Many of Ron's articles are accurate, actually.
I'm from the West Coast. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning right now. Anyway, prior to joining YouTube, he was a strategist for Time Warner. Am I right so far?
That is correct.
So far, so good. All right. So now my questions hopefully are better than those introductions. All right. So let's start with how our panelists see the world and how it's starting to shake out for user-generated content and for and for social networks. Now here's a couple stats that I had some non-Forrester companies pull for me that talk about where they see the state of some of those things. There's a company called Hitwise, which measures traffic to websites, social network websites, which it said of the 41 that they measure, and there are many more than those out there now, that it is down 21% so far this year. Its measurement of 71 online websites, online video websites that is, was down 7% over the same period. So there's something going on there. Hopefully our panelists will describe to us, and in the process of that, they might well describe how they see what they are doing. I guess this is my freebie to have them tell you what they're up to. ComScore, another unit that I had pull some numbers, says that traffic over the same period, the last 1 year, from some of the larger sites have either stayed steady or they started to level off. YouTube, 78 million uniques in January, was 6.5% above its levels of a few months ago, which is a slowing from its spectacular rise of before. And both MySpace and Facebook are still very large, but creating new viewers at a somewhat slower rate. So I guess my question to all of you, take them as you wish, and it's the softball to throw in what you guys are up to, I think. Have we reached a kind of inflection point for social networks? Had we been here several years before, it would have been a gee whiz press conference about social networks and user-generated content as being the hottest thing around. But have we reached a kind of inflection point for both social networks and user-generated content? Has the newness factor worn off? Are we now into the hard work of differentiating, creating the ones that will be sticky and beat off some of the competition? Who would like to start?
I'll take a shot at that if you want.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Our author's going to start with that.
I think if you look at the last 2 years, it was a period in which a lot of people, mainly a lot of young people, were discovering social networks and all of the other aspects of the online social phenomenon, YouTube, blogs, user-generated content of all kinds. And if there's a leveling off now, I think it's because most of the people who are excited about this stuff have already reached a saturation point. How many of you were involved in a social network? Raise your hand. A member. And how many of you are a member of at least 3 social networks? It's a pain in the ass, isn't it? So that's one challenge. There's a serious usability challenge, and my colleague Charlene Lee, the co-author of this book, says that we need to get to a world where you carry your identity with you instead of having to check everything everywhere. The other challenge is the people who haven't done this, I think, we got to have a serious increase in usability on these networks before they'll go ahead. So those of you who are not in these networks and all of your friends who are not in these networks, they might become interested, but it'd be a lot easier if it was something that wasn't so difficult for them to figure out.
I think also that inflection point is definitely upon us. We're seeing the MySpaces and Facebooks, which were the big buzzwords, as you mentioned, the last couple of years, YouTube, obviously another big buzzword out there. But I think that, while we'll see continued growth in the video space and I think into the branded entertainment space, the whole social networking, as Josh refers to, as being just kind of a bother, trying to maintain various profiles, widgets, keeping people up to date on your status, the whole beacon thing with Facebook. It becomes very hard, I think, for consumers and I think for entertainment companies like my own to say, how do I control my messaging across all those? Affiliate marketing for what it is, how do I really make sure that my correct information is out there, is being virally syndicated correctly or as correctly as possible, and that users can actually jump into it and mash it up and play with it. I think we're starting to see some new examples in that. You mentioned Hulu. You're able to mash up stuff. Sling Media, you're able to take a 2-minute clip and send it around and see where it can go and create some kind of unique path to it. But I think that where MySpace and Facebook are going is, again, where the numbers aren't yet. So they're obviously going to international destinations and trying to push harder into mobile, obviously. And for an entertainment company, lastly, for us, it's trying to say, which ones can we have the capacity to cover? And it's not that many very well.
I don't know that the numbers are accurate. I mean, from a ComScore perspective, both MySpace and Facebook are both trending upwards. I mean, the point that you're making is that Facebook and MySpace are seeing declines in numbers. That's
No,
not,
I said the growth rate has started to slow.
but that's natural though. I mean, I don't know that there's any issue there, and for us to say that they're not doing as well or that the bloom is off, I think is sort of, that's a conversation we could have had in 2003 and it would have been foolhardy.
How about MTV? Is MTV seeing the kinds of growth we're talking about?
We have a partnership with a company called Social Project, and we've rolled out social networking features to a lot of our websites, and we're really pleased with the results. But I don't need to advocate on behalf of Viacom to say that anybody who adds these features to their websites is going to see a jump in traffic, a jump in time spent, and a jump in the number of return visits per month. You can. Josh's point about the usability being a problem is definitely the case, but anybody who turns their back on it or decides that that's not part of their agenda moving forward, I think shouldn't be in the business.
Yeah, I'm reminded of what Yogi Berra said that about a restaurant. He said nobody goes there anymore. It was way too crowded. That's part of what's happened here is that people have started to say, hey, this is way too crowded. We got to find something new. And the next 500 sites that they're participating in don't appear in these rankings, but they're still social media.
I think it's without doubt that audience engagement is there to all of these points. I think the key challenge right now is making a business out of it, because I think the privacy issues. I view a social network really as from an advertising point of view as a psychographic targeting network. So people are expressing their interests much more actively than, say, a behaviorally targeted network. So from a pure dollars and cents point of view, I think there's an opportunity that really has not yet been realized. And I think as many of these networks look to pay back their investors, they will push the bounds of what types of privacy people are willing to accept. We've seen a bit of a backlash with Facebook, and I think there's going to be an equilibrium. So right now, basically, we have all these great services that are free and relatively few ads. They're starting to pop up, but I think we're going to see perhaps some of that growth rate slow as not only people get saturated, but also people are turned off by some of the advertising, and the experience is less than they initially signed up for. So I think that a natural equilibrium will be reached between audience engagement and then obviously generating a profit over a multi-year period.
Okay.
I think just one other thing to mention from a YouTube standpoint, we really haven't seen traffic slow or traffic growth slow. And I think one of the reasons, if you compare it to a Facebook or some of the more traditional social networks, is that at YouTube you can use it sort of on your terms. Meaning, if I'm going to use Facebook, if I'm going to start to use a traditional social network, I need to have a username, I need to have a password, I need to populate with information. At YouTube, you can do all that stuff if you want to, and you can share videos and you can upload videos. But it's very base. It's actually can be just used as a video watching site. And I think that that's been something that, as people don't want to make that big time investment up front with the username and everything like that, it's something that's actually really helped YouTube just kind of gain additional traffic over time.
Well, and I would just add, I think that social networks and UGC are just one aspect of the equation. I think the bigger trend and something that is absolutely sustainable long-term is that the internet and these new mediums have allowed companies to be more relevant in people's lives, to open up media and not make it a black box where it's a one-way conversation, but to let people participate in media and in that conversation. And I think that's a trend that's sustainable regardless of how the social networks come together, whether UGC is a key component or not. People want relevancy and they want to participate, they want to have a voice and a say in what they're saying, and they actually take what other people are saying and listen to it. They filter through it, but they listen to it, and I think that's a trend that's here to stay.
I'm going to, along these same lines, I pulled out a study by a site called Geek Sugar. It sounds like an Elliot Spitzer site, I'm sorry to say. They did a...
You made it 15 minutes.
And I didn't pay anything for this thing, by the way. All right, they surveyed a couple of 100,000 people, and the first thing they said was, "Yes, I am sick of new social network sites. There are enough." 82%. "Nope, I look forward to social networking's 14%. So, you know, this may be a gimme. This may be what somebody might do. But nevertheless, there does seem to be a feeling out there that we've had this overload. And so the question is not so much why is there an overload. We've kind of gone over that a little bit right now. But what do you do if you're an existing site to combat the overload? Are there things that you guys are doing to recognize that there's so many out there that in a strategic sense you guys have to do differently?
Sorry, this is exactly the question we get from many of our clients. And the first thing any company has to do is to understand its own customers. You want to see what the social profile of your customers is. If your customers are MTV's customers, we have this example in the book. We look at the people in Generation Y, for example. They're already out there. They're on these networks. So for you to start another one is a little bit challenging. You really have to connect with these people where they are because they're already out there. I'm sure Ty's got a different perspective on that. But if your customers, I mean, we did this for a media company recently. We looked at their customers, which is a certain subset of mom demographic, and they were not on these sites, and they weren't blogging. And we had to say to the company, you know, your strategy to create a site where people can do all this blogging, well, only 14% of your customers are interested in that. That's well below average. So maybe you need to look at it differently. So it really is very variable depending on who you're trying to reach. That's my problem, whether you're Geek Sugar or ComScore. If you look at the entire population as this monolithic lump, then you really miss the subtlety that's important as companies build a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that, I think just in any marketplace, people look to brands as kind of beacons of quality or of something that's aligned with what they're looking for, to Josh's point. We at Reuters set up what we call an affiliate network, the Reuters Affiliate Network, where basically we parcel together what we view as aligned blogs, other small sites, other media properties. Some of them have social features, others don't. Also larger sites like The Guardian, which is a significant US audience, to really act as a kind of an umbrella brand for our audience and offer them really a quality view of the web, if you will, quality being, of course, a subjective term. But it means something to our audience, and it allows them to not only navigate our property, but also navigate properties that have an affinity in terms of a brand association with Reuters. So that's just what we're doing and our approach to deal with this fragmentation, because I think people are overwhelmed, whether it's social networks or other types of sites. And I think people, like any marketplace, look to brands to help them to navigate that space.
Can I just ask the question, is Reuters a quote-unquote new media brand? Is it a brand that can stand on its own? It's 120 years old or something? I mean, by the way, McGraw-Hill is like, 104 years old, so I'm not throwing stones here.
Well, I think 16 million people a month would believe that it is a brand. So 16 million people a month come to Reuters.com in the US alone. They come to us on mobile, interactive TV, digital signs, et cetera. And so we certainly have been around a while. And in fact, many of you who are in the industry, I'm sure, are familiar with our brand. We have been a latent brand, and it's only in the last 4 or 5 years that we've actually gone direct to consumer. And we've seen our brand awareness rise roughly 10% per year, every year for the last 4 years. So we now have roughly a 50% brand awareness among the general US adult population. We track this because, of course, it's important to us. So I would strongly argue that we do have a brand. We're not trying to be a brand to all and sundry. We're very specific in our target. We target business professionals. So I'm hopeful that many of you have heard of Reuters and go to Reuters.com regularly because you're part of our audience. But we're not trying to target soccer moms or retired people or any other segment. We're focused purely on business professionals in terms of our direct-to-consumer activities.
Ron, I also want to add, I think the sort of fragmented market experience we're all feeling is something that, you go talk to MySpace and they'll say, given we've got 1,000 employees roughly, we're going after 14 countries a year on top of the US, North America, you have no chance of creating your own social network. You have, Mark, who's created Ning, which is a white label version of that Ning.com, of course, which is well funded, which is actually a very good platform and well constructed in terms of its architecture. You've got Ty over here with Flux.com, which is Viacom's entry into the market through Social Project, which is really trying to add social properties, and you correct me if I'm wrong, social media properties and potentially distribution to any site on the web, which is an aggregate approach, which is what Google and YouTube have been doing so well at, is just kind of rolling up various amounts of traffic or users into something that works for them. And we also have other players like Cisco with its EOS platform, entertainment, can't remember the rest of the acronym, but entertainment on demand type thing, where they're buying into the approach that they have to, like Reuters, get into the direct-to-consumer market. I think for brands, though, at large, it's, again, I go back to what I said before, it's really about knowing what your focus is, your psychographic, what a registrant on one of your social networks, if you want to go niche and play against the big guys, is, and secondarily, how much you really are going to syndicate that out via a widget approach or whatnot.
Well, I just think it goes back to value. I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with all of these comments. I think people will go to brands that they trust and recognize. I think that but what they'll look for is they'll look for something that adds value to their life. If you are adding something that they can't get otherwise, they will go to you and they will stay with you. I mean, I think Google is the classic example of that. A lot of people have tried to better Google search technology, but because of that network effect and what they're able to deliver you on a search basis, they've been able to add value to their life, and their market share just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I think the same thing is true in social networks. If you're able to add value and give people who are coming there something that improves and enhances their lives, they will keep coming to you. And that, again, to Josh's point, is understanding your consumer, understanding what they're looking for and who you're talking to, and putting a product out there that really connects with them.
Is there a value proposition that Current's doing these days that fits that image?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Current is actually not a TV network. We started, our first consumer product was a TV network, but at its core, what Current is a peer-to-peer news and information network. And the reason why we started Current is because we believe that a lot of the issues that were of relevance and importance to young adults, music and fashion and spirituality, as well as current events and social issues, were not being talked about in a relevant way to that generation. And that if we opened up the medium and let them share their experiences and had a voice, that the people who were getting that information would relate to it much more. And so we've created this whole system, and we've kind of re-architected media so that anybody can get involved and create content and share those experiences. And then we create ways for people to access those experiences. The first way was a television network. We then launched a website at current.com, which has actually had phenomenal success. We've grown 700% since launching that website back in October and changing it from its original incarnation. And we're looking for all sorts of ways going forward to give people access to that conversation and then feed them back what people all over the world are experiencing. And again, believe that we've tapped into a value proposition that nobody else is providing them today, and it's been very successful.
Any others have success stories of that sort that they'd like to talk about? All right, so let's switch over to a little bit to user-generated content. Now, my very first experience with YouTube, and this is to show Mark that I'm a little bit less the dolt than I appeared to be in my introduction. My very first experience with YouTube was, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, with an 80-year-old guy from Great Britain who was spinning tales of what it was like when he was growing up in Great Britain with the bombing and how he survived. Totally charming. I turned in every night for, you remember this guy? I turned in every night, I tuned in every night at 8 o'clock, desperate to hear what his latest thing was totally upset when he decided, because he was getting too much publicity, he was on a lot of local television shows, that he got off. But he was unique, he was granular, he was special. There was a reason to look at him. So now, if you go on YouTube, you have Katie Couric, who has her own channel. There's a bunch of stars out there on some other channels that are promoting Obama's campaign. Companies have their own pages. My question is really whether a good thing got ruined, in the sense that you've let the pros in and made it homogenized, made it too professional, made it less granular, less interesting, and whether or not we're suffering from that to some degree.
Sure. So I think the short answer would be, I hope we haven't ruined it, and I don't think we have. And if you talk to some of the professional media partners that I work with, one of their biggest asks is, how do I make sure my content gets found in YouTube? Because it is sort of a democracy of content. We don't really advantage content from our professional partners relative to the 80-year-old in the UK. And we think that that's one of the powers of YouTube. I think, secondly, one of the things that's made YouTube as popular as it's been has been really what I think of as two things. One is the ability to find any sort of content up there. So whether it's the 80-year-old from the UK, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's CBS or NBA highlights from the night before, Katie Couric's a great example. So having that breadth of content. And then I think secondly, and this goes back to sort of the earlier question, which is there social network fatigue? We actually don't really take a point of view on that, because we allow content to be found anywhere through the embedded player on YouTube, where you can take content and put it on your blog or third-party websites, and it still plays out of the YouTube servers. And we've also enabled people to upload from anywhere. So you can do it from digital video cameras. You can do it from any number of devices. So from our standpoint, we stay pretty agnostic in terms of where people are going to get that content, and then also what type of content they're going to consume. And what we think is, much like, I think from a Google standpoint, Google has this mission, I think it's organize all the world's information. We think about it very similarly. We're not going to cut ourselves off from one set of content, well, aside from adult, but we're not going to cut ourselves off from one set of content to advantage another. And we think that's been a lot of the power.
Yeah, I actually just wrote a blog post about what you're saying, and Ron, I have to say, I hadn't known this about you, that you're such a glass is half empty kind of guy. But,
I'm a reporter. I'm a reporter. You're supposed to fill the glass for me.
okay. Well, it's funny because as we created this book, we got criticized, but I knew we were doing okay because we get criticized from both sides. The people I call the purists said, corporations in the middle of social networks? Corporations can't have a voice in the social world. The social world is about people. So get off of my social network. And the corporations, what I call the corporatists, came at us from the other side and said, it's out of control. They're doing whatever they want. They're saying whatever they want. We have to stop this. You want us to be involved in it? No, we have to stop it. Well, it can't be stopped, and it is out of control. But corporations can participate in an authentic way. And, you know, if Katie Couric comes on there and she says, you know, here at CBS, these are the things that we found, you don't say, oh, wow, she's shilling for CBS. No, it's like, that's her job. That's what she does. You expect her to do that. And if you like that, that's fine. And if you don't like it, not only can you not watch it, you can put up a thing that says, I'm going to make fun of Katie Couric, and maybe you get more viewers than she does. It's a democracy, just like you said. So I actually think I welcome the corporations coming in for two reasons. One is corporations have something to say, and now they have to say it in an interesting way. I welcome them into the dialogue. And secondly, they really need help, so they call me. So, I mean, it's a tough thing to figure out, but yes, you should take those steps.
And I think Josh's point about authenticity is absolutely the key to this whole thing. You know, we have been very successful bringing on major sponsors, Toyota, L'Oreal, T-Mobile, et cetera, into Current. But the way that we do it is to integrate them into the conversation. We actually make them part of the conversation with the audience. And so they're not interrupting that experience, they're actually part of that experience. And as a result, we've been able to go back to, you know, our audience and do research and show that over 30% of the people who are watching actually have a very positive impression of the sponsors on our network, and an even higher percentage are telling people about things that they've seen on Current. And so I don't think that it's an either or. I think, again, it goes back to relevancy and authenticity and being pure in what you're doing and not trying to impose something on an audience in an open world where it's much more free form.
Just to build on what Mark said, user-generated content has been in our DNA since the day one, 150 odd years. So whether it's you know, tsunami footage or Concorde blowing up, those are all user-generated content sets that we actually source in the field. What's changed is technology, and it's allowed both on the input in terms of capturing images and submitting them, and then on the distribution side, getting them out to as broad a number of people through our own properties, but also through things like YouTube, et cetera. I think those dynamics have changed, and it's just scaled that much more. And I would like to call out an example I think that has been helpful, and I think, again, to build on Mark's point, I think relevancy is the key. You can't just shove this stuff down people's throats. So we actually partnered with Yahoo on an initiative called YouWitness, where Yahoo is very good at aggregating large audiences. We're very good at editing and providing that imprimatur, so to speak. And so they gather the content, basically. We vet it. We stamp it if it meets our standards. We distribute it back out to Yahoo and our own property. And we've actually managed to get it sponsored and renewed several times by Sony. Obviously, they have a relevancy in terms of digital cameras, camcorders, things like that. So I'm still surprised that you managed to pull off all of these brands working together, but I think that's an example of contextual value being created for both the user and the advertiser, and ultimately the media property as well.
All right. Well, here's a perennial. It's one of my half-empty glass questions, Josh. Advertising. Advertising is a perennial since day one. How do you monetize these things? You know, the advertisers, at least from my point, occasionally you are playing with dynamite if you're an advertiser. I was joking, I think, with Ty, and he emailed me back, do you really believe in this? Because, you know, does an advertiser really want to be next to something that is to them objectionable, whatever it is? And so you have that problem. But nevertheless, you have MySpace going crazy with advertising. They have a unit within their company that spends $1 million a year to sign on advertisers, to put advertising into their site. It is a hard and fast model of theirs, and is one that they hope to grow with along with their Google arrangement. So I was hoping I could talk to what do you do to create advertising that the cats in the toilet bowls don't chase away, that are enticing enough that people want to watch, that they don't want to flip off or maybe get pissed at you because you have it there sitting next to something that they would rather watch. And I'd like to start, if I could, with current television, because they actually have a very interesting model, and that is which they ask their users to create advertisers in a contest, I believe it is, and the best ones actually get on the air. And, oh, by the way, they also have J&J, General Motors, a bunch of other clients who are paying them about $19 million a year. This is a company that has about $60 million in revenues. And so that's a pretty large chunk of their revenues for an area that I personally, with my half-empty view of the world, thinks is a tough sell. So why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. You know, it actually has been one of the most remarkable parts of what we've done, because as we talked about, what we've done is we've opened up the whole model of television and let our audience participate in that, and we've translated that to our advertising as well. But we haven't done it actually in a contest way or kind of promotional way. We've done it in a very straightforward way, just like any advertising comes to market. So what we do is we work with major brands. We've worked with Toyota and Sony and L'Oreal and T-Mobile. We put together a creative brief, and we put that creative brief on our website with assets that people can use, images, music, a tagline that we want them to produce to, and then we turn it over to our audience and let them make their own creative interpretation of the products to that creative brief. So just like any advertising agency creates to a creative brief, we let our audience create to a creative brief as well. And what we've ended up with are absolutely spectacular ads. And each one is totally different. Some are highly technical in nature. Some are much more emotional. But what we found is that our audience prefers them 9-to-1 over traditional creative that they see, which, if you think about the return and the connection that that's making with the audience, that's a pretty good return for the sponsors that we've been working with. And as a result, Toyota's now on their, I think, 4th or 5th viewer-created ad campaign. T-Mobile's on their 3rd. We've been able to keep these guys involved. And I was telling Josh earlier, you know, everybody gets something different out of it. L'Oreal actually, came back to us because they said they learned more about their products and the way people perceive their products through the process of going through the viewer-created ad campaign than any research that they've done previously on those products in the past. So it's a really interesting process. It's a very scary thing for companies, of course. You know, turning your brand over to to the world at large is not their typical way of doing it. But if you do it in a managed process, a carefully defined process, and you respect the audience, the things that you come up with are absolutely spectacular.
I also think that there's a challenge between traditional media firms, which sell on a CPM basis, and a lot of the work that larger search engines do on a CPC basis, and the larger media companies don't have the wherewithal or the staff to actually sell on a CPC basis, and that's where you've seen real growth from an advertising perspective, though at a much lower, it's much lower than on a CPM basis. The other challenge is the way that the advertising is displayed on top of the content, whether it's UGC or professional video. Even for us, even for the stuff that we do online, we're challenged to find advertisers who have 15-second post-roll, because by and large they're trying to repackage commercials, and it's 2008, so hopefully this would have been solved 2 years ago, but we're still not there in terms of like the type of advertising that's shown or the ad models that work. I think that the stuff that my colleague at YouTube is doing with respect to the lower thirds that run while you're watching the video is where we're seeing a lot of interest. But right now you have there's a technology adoption gap between people who advertise and the displayed modules that are available to them. And nowhere is that more evident than on the material that's on the sort of full episode players that you see on some of the larger traditional broadcast networks, in which they have interactive ads that happen every, for an hour show, happen every 18 minutes or so. Those bins have not been well defined. They don't know what interactivity they're driving in those bins. And so a design shop out of San Francisco called Method Design is sort of pursuing a single standard for the player that ABC and Fox uses, and I think that you'll see other people adopt that as well.
I think I'm sorry. I think there are two main things that we thought about when we introduced our ad product that Ty alluded to, which is a flash overlay that plays from second 15 to 25 during the video. It's interactive, so you can click on it, pauses the video, pops up a video ad or whatever the creative might be. But anyway, we thought about basically two main constituencies. The first is the advertiser, and how do we make the advertiser sort of comfortable on a site which is, predominantly UGC. And the way we've done that is we've restricted the ads to what I'll call professionally produced content. That includes sort of two buckets. The first is any media company that we work with. CBS, NBA, you'll see ads against their content. Secondly, we have qualified some previously what you would call UGC content developers. So Lonely Girl 15, Renetto, Smosh, some of the names that may be familiar to people in the room. And we will serve ads against that content as well. It means that they're abiding by the YouTube terms of service. It means that they've consistently uploaded high-quality video to the site, and they've been popular. What we found is that advertisers have been very receptive to those sets of content producers. They can choose within that corpus of content what they want to advertise against. The second constituency is obviously the user. And we looked at things like pre-rolls, we looked at things like post-rolls, and what we found is that the least intrusive and also the highest value unit, at least from a starting point, was this in-video overlay. It's less intrusive than what a pre-roll would be, and also it's a very continuous experience for the user, because it would be a real shame if I was a user and I clicked on an NBA video and all of a sudden I start seeing a Sprite commercial. But then I click on, the 80-year-old from the UK and I start seeing that video right away, right? And so from a user standpoint, it really helps the user know that right away they're going to see the actual content, and then when they see the in-video overlay, it may be seen as much as coincidental to the user.
Just to jump in on those points, two things come to mind on this topic. First of all is an expression that I love, which is that perfection is the enemy of the good. And I think brand advertisers are used to, from traditional media point of view, perfection. A highly controlled environment where they can put out whatever they want and pay for it, and expect users to either tune out or gobble it up or go buy those products or whatever it is. They're used to that one-way conversation. And that's how the traditional media model has been built up, obviously primarily television. I think we're seeing a growing group of advertisers who define their brands through confidence, and who understand that they need to follow the audience and go where there is audience engagement, and they're willing to trade off some of that perfection for what is good, i.e. audience engagement. And I think that we're seeing a number of brands, for us, Sony and a variety of car manufacturers, Acura did Second Life with us about a year ago, but just to name a few, but a variety of brands who have that confidence to engage. We have a product called a virtual brand channel, which basically addresses this issue and asks brands to actually go with the workflow of users throughout the site. Sometimes there'll be a story that they're not entirely comfortable with being associated with, but they're getting volumes. They're getting brand association volumes against generally the right type of story. And that's how we solve what we call the microsite problem, which is a perfect, beautiful little site that nobody goes to. So that's something that I think is important. The second point about ads being intrusive, again, I think that's coming from a traditional media mindset, because ads, many people are turned off by ads because they are so irrelevant. I live in New York City. I have no interest in buying an SUV. I don't need a car here. And why should I watch that ad? It's not relevant to me. So to me, it's less about format and actually much more about targeting and relevancy. I believe that for every single piece of ad creative produced in the world, there is at least an audience of one for it. The challenge to the industry is actually connecting those two things. It's not a debate about which format or the other. I think the challenge is on connecting those two elements.
Yeah.
But going back, I'm sorry, Josh, but on that front, though, that traditional advertisers don't know how to effectively leverage targeting unless it's done across a multitude of sites. Like, I would say, like, even to say that you didn't live in New York and you lived in New Jersey, which is, the big car culture area, so I'm told, I don't go there. You would, to know that you were intending to buy a car or that you needed a car, someone would have to track your activity on a different site, which suggests that sort of the federation that you're doing from an advertising perspective, or that others are doing from an advertising federation in terms of targeting what customers do on other sites, is a prerequisite to being able to actually deliver targeted advertising on a brand front.
I think when you say that, I think of Amazon. So when you go to Amazon, obviously a property that has many tentacles and merchants and many instances, a lot of data sampling going on there. When you type in a book or a CD or whatever, and it gives you those recommendations, if you ask people, are those ads? They would say, of course not. Those are recommendations. But guess what? They're ads, and they add value, and people don't even view them as ads because they add value. And it happens because there is so much sampling going on across a federation of, Amazon storefronts and the destination side and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I've seen advertisers participate in two ways here, and one's great and one's awful. So the great one, which is challenging, difficult to do, is you become a participant in the network. So I'm thinking of Adidas or any movie you can think of on MySpace. They have great pages. If you talk about Facebook, you have Victoria's Secret, Ernst & Young's career page. On YouTube, Dove Evolution, a fantastic video, got millions and millions of views, anything by Blendtec. And go search Greg the Architect. If you're interested in service-oriented architecture, you'll actually learn something. But if you're not, you'll just have a good laugh. So these are people, but it's hard because you have to actually think this way. This is what's also going on with Current. The other way to participate is, well, I'm going to advertise against what's already on these sites. And that sucks. It's terrible. You go, I go on to Facebook, and I'm being told that there are thousands of singles available for me to meet in my area. Well, I'm almost 50 and happily married and not interested in getting my name in the papers and having to resign as governor. So I'm not interested in meeting singles in my area. It's amazing to me. Facebook knows all this stuff about you. So does MySpace. For that matter, based on what you're looking at, so can Google or YouTube. And yet, the ability for me as an advertiser to say, hey, I'm interested in people who are interested in camping, or I'm interested in people who are in the market for a car right now, or I'm interested in people who are Republicans, is just not available. And I will get really excited when this targeting can happen in a way that's like at Amazon, where you as the viewer say, oh, that was actually useful and helpful to me, as opposed to, ooh, you set off my privacy detector because you use things based on what you know about me.
All right, all looking at me. All right, so this doesn't just magically happen that an advertiser decides he wants to be in on this. What steps do you guys have to take? Maybe I'll start with Mark down at Current, because somewhere along the way somebody has to sit down and give them the pros and the cons, hopefully more of the pros and the cons, to take a chance, to take on. I'm reminded of was it Burger King ads that somebody did that were moderately successful, shall we say. Not everything works, and some people get a bad taste in their mouth as a result.
Yeah.
What did Current have to say or do?
Well, I mean, it is absolutely an education process. There's no two ways about it. It's not a traditional ad sale. You can't just kind of throw it out there and people come and sign up. We have a sales team. It's a fairly long lead time process, but those advertisers that have been involved have been coming back year after year and increasing their spend. So once people do make the leap, they actually understand the difference and the experience and the engagement that we're able to provide, and they quite like it. One of the things that I find quite remarkable is we've never once had a negative ad submitted to Current in one of these VCAM campaigns. And I think that that's because the process that we go through is a managed process. It's a very respectful process. But our audience understands that's not what this game is. This isn't a game of just you can say whatever you want and it's a total free-for-all. This is about authentically creating an advertisement for one of our sponsors. And if you're interested in playing in that, great. We would love to hear from you. And if you're not, then you can go do that somewhere else that's a more open platform and put it up and let it ride. But I think that you have to set out the ground rules, and as long as you're authentic with it, people are cool with it. It's if you try and play games with it, if you try and seem like a completely open platform and then you're not, or you try and seem like a managed platform but you're actually open, that I think you get into problems with both the advertiser side and your community side.
So what percentage of your folks say thank you but no thank you?
Well, there's lots of people in our community who don't create ads for us. I mean,
But of those that are presented to advertisers, how many of the advertisers say thank you but no thank you?
Well, we usually get, on average, about 100 submissions per campaign, and of those, we select 4 or 5 to run on the network and show on the website. But that, we often have many more than that are great ads. They're just not the top 4 or 5 that we get. But, I would say probably, like anything, 80% or so are ads that are good, but probably not of that quality. And we generally get about 20% that are pretty good ads that you would show on the air.
Okay, I think I may have interrupted somebody else. Is somebody else going to talk the care and feeding of an advertiser?
Well, I'm happy to say something. I view this as a more fundamental education process, and it's not just about social media and user-generated content, but really any new type of interactive ad, whether you're selling banner ads on mobile or a click-to-call feature. We've even done mobile stuff on signs. I think it's a more fundamental question of education, and I view it kind of like a highway and city streets. If you will, traditional media, the city streets, they move a little slower. And then the highway, obviously, a little faster. And what we try to do in our sales process is create on-ramps, because I think a lot of folks go into either a brand or an agency and show them the highway and say, it's so great, you just got to get on this. And they have no way to map it back to their city streets. So what we try to do is work within existing ad formats as much as possible. So, for example, we launched something in Reuters Labs, which I encourage you to check out. It's our open showcase for innovation. Something called News Maps, where we mashed up Google Earth and our news feeds, so you can see how news is unfolding across the world every day, every hour. And we pitched that to an advertiser in Labs. They loved it. What do we do with this? And we had a product challenge of like, well, how do we integrate this into the product, et cetera? What we ended up doing is actually integrating it into a standard banner ad, 300 by 250. So you actually can just, the advertiser sponsors that unit, created that unit, and it's got that product feature within it. So you're basically we traffic it and forecast it in all the regular ways. You're going to get X million impressions over this time frame, this CPM. So it's all standard language that any agency or brand would understand and can map back into their systems. But they're getting that innovation and that buzz off of it. They do PR on it, they feel good about themselves. So they're kind of getting a bit of both. And I think that's really the challenge, is to talk in the language that they're used to, i.e. the city streets, excuse the metaphor, and then, but give them a bit of the highway and let them test it and get on board, and then they renew. And we've had multiple renewals, in fact, many renewals on those types of campaigns.
Yeah, when I talk to brand companies, there's what I call the balance of terror. There's one terror is, oh my God, if I get involved with this, we're going to have to deal with legal, and people will be manipulating our brand in ways we're not comfortable with, and oh, I don't know if I can handle that. And the other terror is, wow, there's all this activity happening out there. It's very exciting. There's all these young people. This is all they do. I'm terrified I'm missing out on something. So they come to me and they've got a complex, because they have all this terror in their minds. And we actually have got sort of adept at helping people to say, all right, You have to take a small step here. Don't put your whole media budget into this. Do it for one brand. Don't, you know, if you're Procter & Gamble, you do it for one brand. You don't do it for all 100 brands at the same time. Bring in the legal people in the beginning. Get them comfortable with what's going to happen. Listen to their objections. Deal with it. If you're in a regulated industry, you can do this, but you have to think about how you're going to do it. Get an executive sponsor so that when somebody has a fit, you can say, oh, well, George said I could do this. And then it's like, all right, well, if George is behind it, then I guess I can calm down a little bit. Because you're like, when you go forward and you do this, the corporation is like a body, and you are like the foreign object that's creating an allergic reaction. And you're going against all the things that companies used to doing, and you need to find ways to make sure you can calm down that reaction, that you can work within the systems, that you break the rules that you're allowed to break, but not the rules that you're not allowed to break. And then once you succeeded once, as Current TV found out, it's a lot easier to go back and say, oh, well, this worked for one brand. Let's try it for the next 3 brands. Oh, you actually have measurable results you got out of this? Oh, maybe now we can think about this. At Procter & Gamble, they found a community they started for young girls was 4 times as effective as ordinary advertising in getting across the impressions they were trying to make. Now, all of a sudden, Procter & Gamble's really interested in this because they can put it up against you know, ads on television and say, maybe it's worth it for us to invest $3 million in this.
I think it's really interesting. Ty was mentioning earlier, you know, the difficulty of the ad formats and that they haven't evolved to keep pace with all this innovation. The other thing that hasn't kept pace with the innovation is the whole process of buying advertising. I mean, we go in and we talk to clients all the time, and we also talk to agencies all the time. And what's fascinating to me is the way that they're talking at cross purposes often. The clients are often saying, we need to try new things, we need to explore, we need to be innovative. But then they turn around and hold their agencies to measurement standards that completely incentivize their agencies to only buy in the traditional ways that agencies have bought. And they're not understanding that they're completely disincentivizing that process of innovation. And I think that there's a process, and it's happening. You know, companies are evolving, but it's a process of getting through and adjusting to the new realities of the marketplace, and making sure that that flows through the entire process. And that's what makes some of this stuff a little bit harder to do. And if you don't have a strong stomach, you probably won't be into it and won't survive. But if you can get through that, as Josh was saying, you end up with very strong relationships with sponsors that keep coming back and doing more and more because they see the value of that different way of doing things.
I think the thing I've seen on the advertising side with agencies is exactly right to what Mark was saying. At Current, you're finding a general, let's call it a blended mix of opportunities, and when they start to say, well, let's try this new thing, it tends to be such a light risk that there's no chance for success, or the exposure is so light that it's like, throw it in for free as added value, and we'll give it a try, and maybe we'll get 45 mashups or 100 mashups or user gen pieces of content. What I think is more interesting, though, because I'm not a big fan of the banner world and that kind of advertising anymore, let's say, is that Josh mentioned Dove's Evolution of Beauty. I know from Ogilvy that hit about 400 million views, and it's kind of an evergreen property that has evolved. There's actually a spoof of it. If you YouTube it, you'll see a spoof that is hilarious and so well created. And I know that Dove didn't, it's obviously live still, so Dove did not ask them to remove that spoof, which mocked their whole campaign. It had campaign for ugliness or something like that. And
it's called Slob Evolution.
Slob Evolution.
Yes.
But I think it's to the nature of, let's call it the brands, to say, you know what, if we make mistakes here, we can actually go to the MTVs, the YouTubes, the Yahoos, etc., who have a mix of companies that they use, from Jump Cut to Flector to Flux, and say, you know what, take that down. We're not good with that piece of content. So again, separate the banner world from this to the video world. I think we're going to see a stronger, so to speak, evolution that the clients and hopefully the agencies catch up to.
All right, so now one of our panelists, he asked that he opined that at a certain point, people get restless and start leaving. And I think the bagels are done back there, so I'm gonna bring up what he thought would be one that would keep you in your seats. The question he suggests is, who's doing the best job out there of creating a social media network? Can't mention your own company's rules here. You know, who's the kick-ass social media site right now or company? And what are they doing that's right? And who'd like to extol the virtues of their competitors?
I mean, I've always been a fan of LinkedIn, and I think they've just relaunched quite an extensive redo of their site. And I think they've taken a few tricks from Facebook, but also have added a few of their own. So perhaps a dull answer given the audience, but I think they're doing a workmanlike job, and I think that it's a very useful network.
What are the hot things that they've added?
They have like this Outlook feature. They have
Activity feed as well.
recommended people. So they basically interpret other networks adjacent to yours and say, you probably know this person. Do you want to connect with them? I've actually signed up for the in-mail feature, so they're getting $20 a month from me now. So it's become to me a much more valuable tool for both maintaining my network and also reaching out to new folks for partnerships, things like that.
So I use, there are a bunch of personal start pages that pull in RSS feeds, and iGoogle is one of them. NetVibes is another, and then it sort of falls off after that. But NetVibes has just launched a new version of their platform called NetVibes Ginger, and that has social networking features. I won't post that as being sort of the penultimate sort of realization of social networking features, but insofar as all of us who are engaged in media are engaged in an audience business more so than anything else. And those of us who are doing software or digital development are engaged in an attention business. They're doing a good job of trying to capture the things that are most important to you, i.e. the things that you read every day, whether they're blog posts, sports scores, stocks, and things of that sort. It's the equivalent of my Yahoo page. And then allowing you to share and distribute that with your friends and use the things that you read as a representation of self. And so I won't say that that's the apex of the medium, but I will say that it's an interesting take on how to do that. And I'll be very I'm going to track how it ends up basically, but it allows you to import your Gmail contacts, your Facebook contacts, and so on, and see the things that they're reading as well.
Ty, did you see this question?
Yeah.
I do not reveal my sources.
We know a company that he's not trying to buy, because otherwise he
Yeah.
would never tell. Positive.
So I'm actually going to point out two networks created by that aren't media companies. The first is, I mentioned, BeingGirl.com from Procter & Gamble. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. So Procter & Gamble had this problem. The right time to capture customer for feminine care products is right at the beginning of puberty. But that's exactly when young girls don't want to talk about that stuff. So they created this BeingGirl.com, and BeingGirl.com is not a community about tampons, because nobody would go to that. It's a community about what it's like to be a young girl, about, crushes and dealing with your parents and the changes that are happening in your body. And it's run very much that way. The branding is extremely subtle. There's a psychologist on there who you can pose questions to. And they distribute all these materials for health classes, and then in the health class materials it says, hey, if you're interested, go and join this community. That's this community that's been 4 times as effective for marketing feminine care products as any television advertising that they've done. And they've been so successful with it that they started with it in the United States. It's now available in 21 countries, including Saudi Arabia. The second, which just to give you an idea of how much I admire this, I consider this to be a competitor to Forrester Research, is IT Research. There's a community called IT Toolbox. If you're somebody who's making decisions about what, the challenges that chief information officers and network architects and people have to deal with, you can log into this, it's free, and then you can ask questions of your peers about, how do I get projects done when the marketing people are always making up their own rules or whatever. And it's been very successful. I look at it with admiration and say, man, I wish that was part of Forrester. So It doesn't have to be, this is part of the deal, is that, people think, oh, well, Facebook is a media company. MySpace is now part of a media company. But there are thousands of these things out there, some of them run by brands, some of them completely freestanding, and they're all competing for people's attention, and they don't think of themselves as media companies, they're just communities.
Sorry, I'll revise my question, sorry, the one that I posed. In terms of, from a business standpoint, Wikipedia, from a social networking perspective,
That's spectacular.
does a spectacular job. They show up second or third in organic search just by dint of the network of links that they have. The people who are on there are insanely passionate, and it is a resource that's used on a regular basis. So though they're a not-for-profit, I would say that from a usage and a traffic and SEO standpoint, those guys are doing a fantastic job.
Others, Mark and Mark?
I'll throw out just one more site that I think does a really good job. And again,
MetaCafe?
MetaCafe is okay as a video viewing site. But I use personally Yelp a fair amount. And I think that Yelp's done a really great job. Again, you can define social network differently depending on exactly what kind of bounds you want to put around it. But in terms of finding content that's been written by other users, much like YouTube is to video, I think Yelp has done a fantastic job of whether it's restaurant reviews or local theaters or whatever you might be looking for. I don't go to Zagat's anymore. I only go to Yelp, and it can plug into it. Again, I'm not close to the business model, but it can plug into it a really nice ad model, just because you have this very sort of in your Amazon recommendations engine spirit, this notion that advertising can be plugged into it in a very targeted way.
All right, Mark?
No.
All right, well, I have no more questions to ask about what did Josh say, the changes in the female body? I think I'm gonna stay away from anything that follows that question up. However, we have time for 10 more minutes of Q&A from the audience. I have, kind of dumb shit reporter questions I can continue to ask, or you can ask some from the audience. Speak loudly. We've got no mics. Stand up, please.
Each of you are involved.
I'm sorry, can you say where you're from? I apologize.
Sure. I'm on the trip. I work in an investment bank in Boston, a firm called Progress Partners. And so my question is around branding. You guys are talking a lot about advertising. Each of you are involved in varying degrees in what is the experiment of interactivity in media with the consumer. And I think it almost adds a new element to what is brand equity, and that is engagement. And so, and I think I've heard a lot mentioned in talking to new networks that are out there, new digital networks. How are you measuring or attempting to measure brand engagement for the clients that you're seeing or working with? So not just advertising, but when it comes to the branding exercise, how are you measuring that element that is engagement?
I'm sorry, just to repeat the question, he's just asking how we're measuring engagement for both our brands and for people who advertise on our brands. Time spent, that's the metric that we use, sorry, to answer it briefly.
Click through.
Yeah, on YouTube, we allow advertisers to sponsor contests, and there's any number of them that have been done on YouTube over the last year or so. But one idea there is that there could be a contest. You could imagine, Dove could sponsor a contest, which is put up your own video, basically, and that's usually what it is. It's around user submissions. So I think for us, streams to the content that they've put up, as well as what we call video responses or submissions into a contest, would be the metrics of success that we look at as it relates to contests.
Are you seeing good response from users based on a contest or a CNN, partnership, or is it kind of, spotty still?
So I would say it has been inconsistent, the success overall, and I think part of it's just how does it resonate with the community? How creative has the partner, the sponsor, gotten in terms of what they're trying to do? How does it get found on YouTube? One of the things on YouTube, which is really sort of part of the quirkiness of the democracy of content, is that you never know what's going to become really popular on YouTube. And so this 80-year-old guy from the UK became popular. Lonely Girl 15 became popular. There's lots of people out there who are trying to become the next Lonely Girl who they're just not. And I think the same can be true of contests.
This is the really big question we're trying to tackle these days, is how to measure this stuff. And I'm urge people not to think about it exclusively in a media perspective. Any company that gets involved in this needs to measure something, whether it's a before and after survey, you're measuring changes in awareness. If you reduce it to media metrics, you're missing a lot of the value. And you know, we did a report on this, on engagement, my colleague Brian Haven and I. And we talk about a lot of possibilities, but we don't offer up a formula because there isn't really any formula you can use at this point. The only thing I'm going to say is, if you start a project, if you are involved in some social application, and you don't measure something that's important to the company, then when the budget cuts come along, and they will, because a recession is certainly something a lot of people are talking about, then you'll get canned. On the other hand, if you are in a position to say, oh, well, actually what we were able to show is that people who visit our community buy 60% more than people who just see our advertising, now all of a sudden it's like, all right, we're going to take the $5 million away from advertising in traditional areas, and we're going to give that to you and you spend it.
You know, it's actually, the whole notion of Current was built around engagement. And what we've done with sponsors is we've integrated them into what we call pod families, so that they're connecting with the people who are most interested in that topic that they're seeing. So for example, L'Oreal sponsors our Current Style Pod, and that content both plays on air and plays online. And then we built a website that essentially gives people in real time the ability to comment on that content, to suggest other websites that they should go to post links to articles and other information. And what it does is it creates a dialogue around that. And we've done research that shows that over 70% of the people watching Current have a computer active while they're watching Current. So they're essentially multitasking. They're engaging with the content online, they're watching it on air, they're participating in it, and we're able to show our sponsors that that engagement is then translating to their brand message, because they're remembering the brands at a higher rate than what others are able to show them, and probably more importantly, they're telling people about brands at a much higher rate than what others are able to show them. So that engagement is actually setting the brand image in their mind and creating a positive image for the sponsor. It's really important to what you have to do in the future, I think.
One quick thing. Go look up on MySpace a report called Never Ending Friending. It was done by Karat and Isobar together with MySpace. And that talks about the pass-along value of stuff on social networks. Really open your eyes in a new way to think about what the value of this stuff is.
All right, well, so you all have homework for tomorrow.
It's called Never Ending Friending. Just search the web for Never Ending Friending and you'll find it.
Never Ending Friending.
Yeah.
That's your homework. 50 pages by tomorrow afternoon. Anyway, that is the last one, I'm sorry, that we have. I've been given the sign back there that we are done. So, so thank you very, very much for joining us. Take care now.